Hi everyone, my name is Joe Garth. In this tutorial, I'm going to be going over the complete Rockify workflow, from Blender to texturing in Substance Painter, and importing the asset directly into Unreal Engine 5. So to begin with, we're going to install Rockify into Blender. So go up to Edit, Preferences, and inside of Blender Preferences you can find the add-ons shelf, and we're going to click on Install. Now on my desktop I've got my newly downloaded Rockify plugin zip file, and I'm going to click the zip file and click Install Add-on. And it should say down at the bottom, modules installed, and if you type in the search just rock, you should be able to find the Rockify plugin, and make sure that little tick box here is ticked. And there's some information about the plugin there as well. I'm going to go off of preferences, and inside of Blender in your viewport just hit N. This little shelf will come up on the right where you'll have a little tab that says Rockify, and click on that and you should be able to see the plugin. Now at the moment I've got the Blender default scene loaded up, so if I go up to File, New, and then General, this is just the sort of default cube with a little lighting setup. We don't need any of the lights or the camera, so I'm just going to delete those. And you'll see that there's this little default cube. So if I go to Rockify and I start changing the, if I start just, generating, clicking generate, you'll see that it looks a bit strange. It's like for some reason the rocks are slightly weird scale, and you're not really getting very good results. This is actually normal behavior. This is simply happening because the rock is actually just way too small. The Blender default cube is only 2 meters across. So this is something we're going to hopefully fix in a patch in the future that will hopefully get slightly better results with the 2 meter cube. But for now, we're really mostly focusing on assets of about 10 meters to about 100 meters, which is really more the kind of rocks this plugin's aimed for. So what we're going to do next is we're going to go to modifiers, and you can see that Rockify's actually created a modifier called GN. That stands for geometry nodes. It's the system that is sort of taking care of the rock generation behind the scenes. But what we're going to do is we're just going to remove that modifier, go back to my default cube, and I'm going to actually scale that default cube up. So if you want to get good results, just scale up the default cube until we've got something that's a little bit more the correct scale. So let's have a look at what scale this is now. About 40 meters. Okay, that seems about reasonable. 40 meters is a bit more of a cliff sort of scale. And now if we go through these plugins, you can see that we're getting much more realistic results, and we can actually go through and try a few of these different presets. So there's granite, limestone. So limestone's nice, it's got this kind of shelving. Granite is more sort of this kind of smooth surface. And then volcanic is this got really rocky, sharp surfaces. You've also got stalactites and stalagmites, so that's, come from the ceiling and from the floor, and those are for more like caves. And these work really well when you kind of make the sort of more pointy looking shapes. So by actually manipulating the cube, you can see that as I manipulate the cube around, you're getting actually different results. So for instance here with the stalagmites, we could make the cube really thin, really small. We can even duplicate the cube and make another little separate one off there and have something like that. Basically we could even move it all the way out. So you can use this to generate different sized rocks and different shaped rocks. I'm going to go back to the volcanic preset. I'm going to make that cube a little bit bigger. And if at any time you want to see just your primitive shape, you can click on the Modify tab and untick this little real-time display modifier. And then you'll go back to be able to see your sort of default cube. So I'm going to make a sort of interesting shape now by making this a little bit thinner, I think. And then I'm going to add probably a little bit of, make it a little bit thinner at the top. And I'm going to go in actually to the primitive shapes, and I'm going to make a few edge loops. And then let's say grab those edge loops and make them a little bit more interesting, sort of twist things around a bit like that. Maybe twist that like that a bit. And I'm just trying to make this shape look a little bit more organic and give it some more, you know, interesting shapes. You can also go in and just change the verts as well a little bit. So once you have a little bit more of an organic primitive, you'll be able to see that that's actually being reflected in the generated mesh as well. And if we make, for instance, parts of that thinner or thicker, you can see how that's working to generate that. And if you want to make the whole asset, I think the whole asset could be a little bit bigger. Let's just scale it all up. I think that's now slightly cooler to have it a little bit bigger scale. And this is really a nice creative stage where you can sort of tweak the object to your heart's content. Like, you can really figure out where you want to put detail and how big you need the object to be, and what sort of proportions you need the object to be as well. And doing it in real time like this allows you to work really, really fast. I'm just going to move a few of those around. I'm trying to create a sort of spire or sort of tower and just make it something interesting. More interesting shapes, the better. And of course, the great thing is you don't really need to worry about, you know, topology or anything like that at this point. There's nothing needed for that. Okay, great. I think that's a really nice, interesting looking shape, and I think we should take this now and try and get this textured and into Unreal Engine. So we have this really cool cliff shape, but as you can tell, all of these are sort of just random different pieces of geometry. And, you know, if we go to the wireframe, it's like they're all just clipping into each other. And if, obviously for real time, this isn't very useful because this wouldn't be very optimized at all. It'd have lots of meshes intersecting each other inside. But luckily we have with Rockify a remeshing function. So if we click on our shape and then click on Remesh Rock, it might take a little bit of time because it's got to use the voxel modifier to remesh the asset. But once that's done, you can see that now we have a nice sort of contiguous mesh, and it's all manifold. And this is now real-time ready topology. Another thing to note is you can actually tweak the resolution of the remeshing by tweaking the voxel size and the decimation ratio parameters. So if you need more triangles or less triangles, try reducing the voxel size to increase the poly count, and increasing the voxel size will decrease the poly count. So that's really up to you. And if you don't really want to touch that stuff, just leave it at the default settings, which I'll do for this tutorial. So now we're finished with the remeshing, we're going to want to UV our object. Now, in order to do that, we're going to want to actually collapse this modifier stack. But before you do that, you might want to save a copy of your scene, just so you have an earlier version. So I'm going to call this one Rock 01. I'm going to save that. And then I'm going to go and actually start applying the modifier stack. So You'll want to go to the very top modifier, the one that says GN, and click this little arrow and click Apply. And what we're doing now is we're just going through the whole modifier stack and collapsing it. And that'll mean that it won't be computing the remesh and decimation modifiers all the time. And that's the main thing that's kind of slowing down Blender at the moment, because it's a lot of stuff to compute to sort of retopologize the mesh and remesh it. And once that's done, just hit save. And you'll now notice that your blend file is now a lot faster and Blender's, working a lot quicker again. That's because it's not having to compute all that remeshing stuff. So the next part of the process is going to be UV mapping. And to do that, we're going to be using Blender's Smart UVs. So go up to UV editing, the tab, and I'm just going to zoom out a little bit. Hit F to actually focus the object. And from there, I'm going to hit tab. I'm going to go to the polygon faces mode, face select mode, and I'm going to hit A to select all of my faces in my mesh. After that, I'm going to go to the little UV drop down, and I'm going to choose Smart UV Project. And I'm just going to leave all the settings on their defaults and then hit OK. And there, as you can see, it's actually generated us some UVs. Now, they're not the best UVs in the world. Obviously, it's just an automatic unwrap. But this is actually pretty much good enough for Substance Painter, and it'll do for the purposes of this tutorial. Now, obviously, if you did have a little bit more time, you'd be able to go in and use the tools to sort of create some UV seams, going into those edges and marking them for seams, and then actually unwrapping the rock manually. But for this tutorial, we don't really have time for that, so I'm just going to use the Smart UVs and try and get it into the engine as quickly as possible. So now that the UVs are done, we're going to export this as an FBX file. So make sure you have your object selected, and we're going to go up to File, Export, FBX. And I'm just going to save on my desktop an FBX file. I'm just going to call this one Rock01. And on the preferences here, I'm just going to select Limit to Selected Objects, and then hit Export FBX. Now for the texturing, we're going to be using Substance Painter, and I'm going to create a new project. So I'm going to go up to File, New, and in Substance Painter, I'm going to have the option here to create a new project. I'm going to select the new file. And the file we're going to choose is the FBX file that we just saved from Blender. So Rock01 FBX. And make sure you select that one. Make sure you also choose the document resolution. I'm going to choose 4K, so 4096. And I'm actually going to change the normal map format to DirectX. And that's so the normals won't be flipped in Unreal Engine. So once that's done, hit OK. And after that, we're going to want to bake the mesh maps. And these are really important because they're going to allow us to use a smart material. So go up to Mode, Bake Mesh Maps, and just choose 4K from the list. Make sure that's selected. You do have the option to use a high definition mesh if you would want to go into Blender and remesh at a really high poly count and have your own really high definition mesh. That could be millions of polygons if you want. But for the purpose of the tutorial, we're just going to use the game ready mesh and just use the one we've just exported, and everything will work just fine with that too. So just leave all these at the defaults and click Bake Selected Textures. And now it's going through and it's baking the normal maps, the ambient occlusion maps, curvature, position, thickness, all of those will be computed. Once that's done, click Return to Painting Mode. So as you can see, everything's still looking grey and not so great, but that's because we need to still apply a smart material. Luckily, Rockify actually comes with a smart material that's purpose-built for exactly this. In order to find that, I'm just going to go to my desktop. So inside the Rockify zip file, which you downloaded from Blender Marketplace, just open that up with your zip editor, or you can even open up in Windows. and just go into that zip file and find Rockify, Resources, Substance, and there's a file called cliffrock SPSM. And I'm just going to drag and drop that onto the desktop. So just extract that into the desktop. And then I'm going to go back to Substance Painter, and I'm going to go up to File, Import Resources, and I'm going to click Add Resources, and I'm going to choose my cliffrock SPSM. And I'm going to make sure that's coming in as a smart material, and it's going into my project, and hit import. Now you should be able to see in the assets panel the cliffrock smart material, and we can simply drag and drop that over onto our layers stack. I'm going to delete the layer 1 from there as well, and now you can see we've automatically got some really nice texture detail going on the rock there. And you can also go in and change some of the settings inside of that smart material just by clicking on the folder. You can see all the various layers that kind of contribute to the effect here, and different colors. You can tweak some tiling variation on some of the texture work, so normal maps and things. And yeah, a lot of this is done through just triplanar projection of different textures, and then it's also using of course the curvature and the ambient occlusion as well to automatically texture the object. And it's really drag and drop, so as long as you have UVs, as long as you have baked your mesh maps right here, you should get fairly good results in Substance Painter automatically. One thing to note is if you ever see that you've got some sort of really hard edges appearing inside of Substance Painter or in Unreal, you can actually go back into Blender and fix that by just right-clicking your object, going Shade Smooth, and then exporting that FBX. So we're just going to re-export the FBX with a smooth shading, and then inside of Substance we can actually go to Edit, Re-import Mesh, and it's just going to re-import that with the correct shading. And we can also then go into mesh maps again and just bake all of those mesh maps again, so they'll all be nice and smooth this time. So that's just something to worry about, because yeah, sometimes obviously Blender will automatically export with hard edges. So if you want to make sure you export with soft edges, you'll hopefully get some slightly softer looking, more organic results. So now that we have our textures, we can actually export those as texture files by going up to File, Export Textures, and I'm going to choose my desktop, and I'm going to make a new folder called just Textures. And I'm just going to leave everything on the defaults and click Export. It'll give us a bunch of different maps, but the only two that we're going to really need are the base color and the normals, because we're actually going to be deriving the roughness from the albedo in the engine to save on some texture memory. So this next step is going to be in Unreal Engine, and I'm just going to load up a completely new project. So I'm going to go File, New Level. I'm going to make a basic project, and yeah, this is just a completely blank level in Unreal. So I'm going to import our rock. To do that, I'm going to go to Window, Content Browser, and I'm going to make a new folder called Rockify, if I can spell it properly. Rockify, there we go. And inside of there, I'm going to import our mesh. So I'm going to go to our desktop, Rock01 FBX, and I'm going to import that. And that's the same FBX file that we exported earlier, exactly the same one that we imported into Blender, into Substance Painter. And I'm just going to drag and drop that into the scene. That's a really big asset. You can also, of course, tweak the scale inside of the mesh import settings. So inside of the static mesh editor. You could change the import scale if you want something smaller or bigger. But yeah, now we've got the rock imported into Unreal. But of course, we have no textures yet. So to import the texture files, we're going to go import into our textures folder, and I'm just going to choose the base color and the normal DirectX. And that's going to import all of our files. I'm just going to save them all. And this is a bit of a habit of mine, but I like to save them with the correct naming convention in Unreal, just so that everything's neat and tidy. So T underscore rock underscore 01 underscore N. Yeah, this is just the sort of default Unreal Engine naming convention. It really helps you organize your files and make sure everything is nice and easy to find. So we have our static mesh rock, and we have our two textures. Now, because I am using Rockify, I'm able to actually just copy a material from Rockify instead of having to build a material from scratch. So obviously, if you don't have Rockify, you just create a new material here. You'd call that like underscore rock, and then you'd probably have to, you know, obviously start from scratch by basically adding your texture samples in there and constructing a material in Unreal Engine. And obviously on YouTube there are plenty of tutorials about how to build your own materials. For this tutorial though, I'm going to use one of the Rockify materials. It's called the Rockify Near Mesh material. So if you go to my Rockify folder, go to materials, you'll find this M underscore Near Mesh master. I'm going to create a material instance of that, and I'm going to copy that into my Rockify folder. So now I have this material instance. I'm going to rename that to mi underscore rock 01. So what this is basically just a pre-configured material with a bunch of settings and nice like features that come with Rockify. Everything's really nice and organized, and there are tooltips for everything. So obviously this is a really nice, useful thing, and it's a way of kind of, you know, giving you a head start, because you don't really need to build a very complex material from scratch yourself. So I'm going to tick albedo and normal, and I'm going to drag and drop my two texture maps onto my albedo and my normal. I'm going to hit save. Then I'm going to go to the static mesh editor, and I'm going to drag and drop my material instance onto the material slot, and then hit save. And as you can see, we've now got the material showing up on my rock. There's one more really great feature that comes with the Rockify Near Mesh material that I'm going to want to use, which is, if you notice when I get really, really close to an asset like this, it's really not holding up very well. So if I go into the Rockify material, I'm going to do a couple of things. One, it's a bit too bright, so I'm going to darken it slightly. And the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to enable detail mapping. So this basically just adds a nice extra level of detail, which will hopefully just help it to hold up a little bit better at very close ranges. It's a little bit wet looking with that low. We can also tweak the roughness as well, just like how rough the surface is. We can go to our buffers, buffer visualization here by going lit buffer visualization and choosing the roughness here. If we tweak the roughness contrast, we can try and get a little bit more variation in the roughness pass. So you can see there's actually a little bit of roughness being derived from the albedo. And if we get close, you can see there's now some more details. Now a lot of this just doesn't look very good right now because of the lighting. The lighting in this basic level is not very nice. If I move some of the light around, you can see, you know, how much better things can look And obviously this is quite a low resolution one. We only went for about 80,000 on the poly count. But if we wanted to, for instance, do a much higher resolution version, we can go in and do that as well. And I'm going to do that right now, just upgrade some of the poly counts on the asset, just to show you guys, just how good it can look if you go really crazy with poly counts and use nanite. And this is the exact same asset with a slightly higher poly count. I simply went back into Blender, opened up my blend file, and I decreased the voxel size in the remesh modifier. That allowed me to increase the mesh to about 500,000 tries, at which point I exported it back into Substance, went through the whole workflow again, just baking the maps again, and baking the textures, re-importing those to Unreal, and now I have a slightly higher resolution version of the exact same asset. The great thing about this workflow is because everything is saved and all of the parameters are saved away in all the different source files, everything is non-destructive, so you can now go in and make tweaks and changes to the asset at any time during production. This example scene was created using assets generated with Rockify. Rockify can be used to generate a variety of assets, and once they're imported into a game engine like Unreal Engine, the possibilities are endless. Rockify started its life as an internal plugin for generating rock formations for Brushify. The Brushify Underworld pack and the Brushify Floating Islands pack are a couple of examples for how Rockify can be used to create imaginative, real-time scenes. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope it inspires you to build assets of your own using Rockify. Thanks everyone, Joe Garth, signing out.